If you have ever used Linux, chances are you have used or at least heard about Ubuntu. In fact, it's one of the most popular Linux distros both on desktops and servers. But did you know there was a time when Ubuntu tried to capture the smartphone market? Here's the full story. Our story starts with a 2011 blog post from Canonical's founder Mark Shuttleworth, where he said, and I quote, "By 14.04 LTS, Ubuntu will power tablets, phones, TVs, and smart screen from cars to office, kitchen, and it will connect those devices cleanly and seamlessly to the desktop, the server, and the cloud." For some context, earlier that year, Ubuntu 11.10 switched from GNOME desktop environment to their own Unity desktop environment. For those who don't know, the desktop environment is basically the whole UX of a Linux distro. For Linux fans, it was a huge shock. GNOME was and still is the most popular Linux desktop environment, but Ubuntu was up to something. Unity was the first step of Ubuntu's vision, a unified operating system that would also run on smartphones, smart TVs, and appliances. This was mainly inspired by the fact that the smartphone market was growing rapidly at the time. The first Ubuntu smartphone OS wasn't announced until CES 2013. It was known as Ubuntu Touch and was based on Ubuntu 13.10. A developer preview was released in the following months. The most unique thing about Ubuntu Touch was the user interface. Instead of using buttons, the UI solely relied on gestures for everything. For instance, swiping left brought a dock-like interface for frequently used apps, swiping right showed recent apps, and swiping down halfway and scrolling left or right navigated through the notification panel and quick panel settings with more options to tweak. The uniqueness didn't stop there. The home screen had a feature called Scopes, which meant it was divided into sections like apps, videos, and music. Each section had its own dedicated search bar. The whole UI had a bright orange theme going on. It had a feature called Desktop Convergence. When connected to an HDMI monitor, the phone turned into a full Ubuntu PC like Samsung DeX, but years earlier. They even had split-screen multitasking for tablets way before iPads and Android tablets had native support. At launch, Ubuntu Touch was shown on a Galaxy Nexus phone. Later, images of the OS were made available for other devices like the Nexus 4, Nexus 7, and Samsung Galaxy S4 Play Edition. A few months after the initial launch, Canonical announced their own smartphone, the Ubuntu Edge. It had flagship specs and a price tag of $800. The design stood out too, sharp, boxy edges with a unibody metal build. To make this happen, Canonical set up one of the boldest crowdfunding campaigns in history, $30 million in 30 days. They even got an $80,000 donation from Bloomberg. Unfortunately, they only managed to raise around $12 million, still a record at the time, but short of the goal. As a result, Ubuntu Edge never saw the light of day. The following year, Ubuntu Touch was opened to third-party manufacturers with minimum requirements of 1 GHz processor, half a gigabyte of RAM, and 4 GB of storage. It wasn't until 2015 that we saw an Ubuntu Touch phone in the wild, the BQ Aquaris E4.5, an entry-level device, followed by higher-end models like the Meizu Pro 5. BQ even launched the first Ubuntu tablet, the Aquaris M10 in 2016, which also turned out to be the last official Ubuntu Touch device. So how was Ubuntu Touch in real life? During the initial launch, reviewers praised the UI aesthetics but found the gesture navigation confusing and inconsistent. For example, swiping from right could take you both home and open favorite apps. Basically, it felt like the phone was trying to read your mind and failing. The app situation wasn't any better. There were a handful of apps and many of them were buggy. In the final build, gestures were improved but performance still had hiccups, especially in entry-level hardware like the Aquaris E4.5. On higher-end devices like the Meizu MX4, things were smoother, but the App Store still remained a ghost town. Ubuntu phones weren't selling as much as Canonical hoped. They also struggled to get reputable manufacturers on board to make Ubuntu Touch more accessible. On top of that, Android and iOS were getting stronger every year, which made the app situation even worse. As a result, in 2017, Canonical officially announced the shutdown of Ubuntu Touch. The story could have ended here if Ubuntu Touch was a closed-source operating system, but it wasn't. Shortly after Canonical's exit, the UBports community took over maintaining Ubuntu Touch, and they have done a great job. For starters, they have upgraded the core Ubuntu version from 16.04 to 20.04, added VoLTE support, Android app support via Droid, and polished many UI elements. They even ported Ubuntu Touch to around 27 devices including the Pixel 3a, Poco X3, and OnePlus Nord N100. You can even buy new phones from a German company called Vola, which ships with Ubuntu Touch pre-installed. So how is it to use now? According to reviews, performance is mostly good. Despite its narrow selection of apps, Droid fills the gap by running Android apps in a container. Some issues still remain, like GPS not working properly, but overall compared to other Linux smartphones, this one is more functional. Of course, it's not really competing with Android or iOS anymore. It's its own niche, mainly for Linux nerds, which is less than 1% of the people. But hey, at least they're living their best open source life. Thanks for sticking around till the end. Hope you find this video interesting. If you did, don't forget to subscribe this channel. And if this video clicked with you, pun intended, you might also enjoy my previous video about Samsung's attempt to create their own smartphone OS. Just click here.